Yes, my name is Matt. This is a picture of me in my studio, my hand in my studio. Some of my instruments that I play and build, I am a musician first, and I bring a lot of my music into my technology. I've worked at all of these companies. From the early days of the internet, I was building data centers, working in storage, doing a lot of rack monkey kind of stuff, plugging cables in, making them look nice, all that kind of thing. I moved into software when I got into AOL, moving into Rackable and Cyber Defender and on into OpenX. I was still doing bare metal. All the way through 2018, I was on bare metal at OpenX. They're in the cloud now. But the past 5 years, since I've started my SRE journey back at OpenX the past 10 years, I've been really heavily involved in the LFI community and resilience engineering and SRE and reliability practices. And one of the things that I love to do is to take what I know about music and combine it with what I know about tech and help people learn. So that's what we're going to do today. This is a little bit of what I'm going to talk about. First, we are going to participate together in a joint activity. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about improvisation, and then that leads on into signals, which leads into the main event, the incident. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with how the humans really fit into all of this. So, day 3 of the conference, we've kind of spent some time together. We've been in rooms together. We've been in maybe talks. You've had lunch. Maybe you've been to a panel. We've gotten to know each other over the past 3 days. Even perfect strangers have gotten to know each other. I love seeing people come up to perfect strangers and just starting a conversation, introducing themselves. We're getting to know each other as people. So this joint activity that we're going to do right now is a musical activity. This is a score, which is on the next page, by Pauline Oliveros. She wrote this book called Deep Listening Pieces. And this piece is from this book. We have a common goal. This is our basic compact. We're going to be performing this piece. So we're going to listen and make sound together with our voices. You don't have to make any sound. You're more than welcome to participate by only listening. I think we'll do this for about 60 seconds, and I have a chime right here. When I hit the chime, we will start, and when I hit the chime again, we'll be done. I'm going to read you the score, and if you happen to be watching this video after the conference, do this too. You can do this at home. Listen for things around your house. So using any vowel sound, sing a tone that you hear in your imagination. After contributing your tone, listen for someone else's tone and tune to its pitch as exactly as you can. Continue by alternating between singing a tone of your own and tuning to the tone of another voice. Introduce new tones at will and tune to as many different voices as are present. Sing warmly. So I'm hoping we can take advantage of the wonderful acoustics of this square, boxy room, and it will sound really great, okay? So I'm on mic, so I'm going to probably hum. You're welcome to sing out loud if you want. So let's get started. That was very nice. That was a great sound. I love that. Yes. So, this is not the clicker. What happened? So we intended to work together. We outlined our basic compact. By coming to this conference, we agreed in a big joint activity. Our tuning to each other, it was interdependent. It wouldn't have been able to have happened if we weren't together making sound. So we stayed committed. I was really impressed at how quickly everyone got started and then how much sound just stayed going through the whole 60 seconds. That was awesome. And did you notice that I wasn't conducting? Did you notice that the choreography of making these sounds and tuning to each other was the choreography that you all did? We were coordinating with these signals, and in these signals we were doing voices starting, pitch changing, lowering, or stopping. So Pauline likes to talk about the mandala as a symbol of attention and awareness. And the attention is the center of the mandala. Attention is the attention that you are giving in your response team. It's the attention that you are giving to a response. It's the attention of looking at what you're working on. It's your work as done. It's what your focus is. But then all around the mandala, the rest of the mandala is the awareness. And so Pauline points out that these things are not inseparable. Actually, the center of the mandala doesn't exist without the rest of the mandala. So you have to have both. You have to have attention and awareness. One of the things that I love about this concept of adaptive choreography, which Dr. McGuire introduced yesterday, is the fact that we are working in this realm of attention and awareness. And I like to think about incident response as being a trio. You're going to hear me say a lot of musical terms. And I like to think about this as a trio. Sometimes it's not a trio, sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's one or two people, but often you need these three things during an incident. So we have problem solvers. Problem solvers work together, they have that local focus, they're making local decisions, and they're pushing the mitigations or whatever themselves, and they may need to check in with someone like a communication person, a communications lead. They're the role, whether it's the same person or not, communicating with the stakeholders. Communication is really important in incidents. And so having this communication role firmly pointed out and defined will help you. So what about that conductor, i.e., the incident commander, or whatever you want to call it? I personally like the term conductor because of the musical connotation. Conductors very often do nothing. Now, they may have a role in rehearsing the music. That's a big role of the conductor. But when you get into a performance, the conductor doesn't do much. But what the conductor does is they have a big view of the orchestra. They can see and hear everything the orchestra is doing, which, by the way, isn't true for every instrument in the orchestra. If you're back there by the timpani, you pretty much only hear your timpani. So adaptive choreography as awareness. When we think about that big mandala, what are we thinking about? Interpredictability. We trusted that we were all going to stay in this joint activity, singing. We were following that same set of instructions. We had the basic compact. We were ready to go. But what if someone tried to start singing Beyonce songs in the middle of our humming? Now, we had directability. It was a little bit hidden. But by singing new tones, we're actually able to direct other people into changing their tone, and we are also able to be directed by the tones that other people are singing. We're even directed by our imaginations in this piece. But what if something pulled our attention? What if we got jolted out of our mandala? And common ground, you've probably heard this term in a half a dozen talks by now. We sensed our surroundings as we listened. We were testing our ability to be heard. I was doing that. I don't know if anyone else was doing that, but since I'm on mic, I wasn't singing in my full opera voice because I would drown everything out, and I didn't want to do that. So I was testing my ability to hear you alongside me. But what if we got interrupted? What if someone's child who was nice, sitting at the back room, just ran up to the front and interrupted the whole thing? Well, in those circumstances, you're probably familiar with having to make stuff up. You're probably familiar with being in the middle of an incident and you don't know what to do because it's an unfamiliar thing. Something has happened, maybe dark debt has raised its head, this complexity that comes together and causes weird problems. So we don't know what to do, we don't have a plan. And production pressure is on us. So we don't have time to plan, so we have to improvise. I like to talk about improvisation in terms of music because I think music is something that all humans connect to. And the thing that I love about illustrating reliability and resilience with music is that we, when we're responding to incidents, we are like we're in a band. And if we are like we're in a band in something like an incident, well, does it make sense for us to act like a band when we're not in incidents? What jazz players do is they build an idiomatic language through practice. Now, they go into the practice room, yes. They practice their scales. They practice how to play their instrument. Maybe they build their instrument. They're doing all these theory of practice things. But they're not doing the practice of practice, which is when we get together with the other people of the team, other people of the band, and we build this language together. And what happens is when we keep doing this, it becomes second nature. We don't think about it. And when that happens, coordination costs are lowered. Muscle memory kicks in, and we can just play, and we could just respond, we can just act. The term practice of practice comes from a book that Derek Bailey wrote called Improvisation, Its Nature and Practice in Music. And in that book, he says, improvisation has no existence outside of its practice. So that means when you are doing tabletop games, for example, practicing for an incident, maybe you're going through the process and procedures of your on-call, that's not really practicing for improvisation. That's practicing for your process. So yes, incidents are improvisation. There's this awesome paper that studied Arctic rescue. And in this paper, I'm going to show you a couple of the conclusions that were verified by this study. N.C. Rude looked at the training that Arctic responders did to prepare them to improvise during Arctic response. Now, let's take ourselves out. I know it felt a little bit like the Arctic the past few days, but let's take ourselves into the Arctic. Imagine the weather conditions in the Arctic. Imagine what rescuers would have to go through if they hit 80-mile-an-hour winds in the Arctic. I don't know if that happens, but maybe it does. There's boats, there's animals, there's all kinds of things that get in their way, and they're always having to improvise. It's an extreme environment. So they have to collaborate. There's no other way for them to do it. And so Rude studied the way that they train, and one of the conclusions of the paper is that you must do collaborative training in order to train for improvisation. So yes, improvisations are incidents, incidents are improvisations. Things get wacky and complicated and chaotic during our incidents. But guess what? I have great news. Improvisation is equivalent to, everybody say it with me, adaptive capacity. Yes. So you can't do improvisation without the ability to do adaptive capacity. They're the same thing. And in order to give yourself the capability to do something like improvisation, you have to act like you're in that jazz band. You have to kind of practice the sorts of signals and mental models that you share, and you build this common grounding. Here's another definition from the paper that others have mentioned. You know, jazz musicians don't think about this stuff. They just play. They learn their instruments and they get together and they play. They kind of learn the signals that each other know. They get to know each other as people, actually. I bet those Arctic rescuers are the same way. I bet they have to get to know each other as people before they feel comfortable improvising together in an extreme environment. We do the same thing in software. We are speaking coordination signals, and in fact, speaking in coordination signals is more accessible. So let's talk a bit about signals. What do they look like? What are they? Another study on improvisation, this time on the music side, these two researchers took a duo, a jazz duo, and they broke down the way that they played, and they actually had the duo play, and then after the duo played, they asked them questions. They asked them questions about, well, you know, what were you doing? It's really, really cool paper about how these jazz musicians aren't thinking about the notes they're playing. They're thinking about what the other person's thinking about. They're always trying to kind of foresee how the other person is going to behave. And that's what we do in joint activities when we're doing them well. We can foresee what our partners will do in certain situations. Now, one of the things that jazz musicians rely on is the fact that they've built that muscle memory when they've been practicing. So they use highly resilient motifs during performance. What are highly resilient motifs? Well, I think that highly resilient motifs have to do with the fact that they're shared. Here's some mental models in music. You probably, if you're a musician or you like music, you may recognize some of these things. These are the things that these jazz musicians are getting together to practice their practice. What does this look like in software? When we get together and we think about incidents, we think about how we work together as a team, these are the kinds of mental models that we're sharing. And they're always different. Even if we have the same cardinal list of mental models, every single person in this room is going to know each of these things a little bit differently than the other person. Someone's going to be a lot better at data than someone is at networks. Someone's going to be a much better programmer than someone who does quality assurance. I don't know. It may be the opposite. So what about signals? There's an interesting conversation we had last night at the hotel bar about these signals. And the fact that you can't perceive a lot of these signals when you're not in the same room with another human being. Think about it. Now, some of these are obvious. Touch, eye contact. How many of you have tried to do eye contact over Zoom? It looks like you're doing eye contact, but you're not really doing it. Body carriage. Have you ever been in a meeting and someone's just like, oh God, you're talking to someone over here? You can't do that on Zoom. Even smell. I like smell because it's like someone brings in their McDonald's lunch to a, an incident review meeting. That's pretty annoying. So what does it look like when we're remote? What does it look like when we're distributed? It looks a lot different, doesn't it? Those aren't the same things. Now think about all the time we've had as humans to practice the right column. And think about all the times we've had as humans to practice the left column. Which ones do you think we're better at? So this leads us into incidents. I have a few Rubik's Cubes up here on the podium. I love to talk about Rubik's Cubes. This is a great one. This is metal plated. I love Rubik's Cubes because they're a really cool display of the differences between complexity and complication. So if we were to just take this Rubik's Cube at face value, this is a very complicated puzzle. How many in here can solve the Rubik's Cube? Okay, about a half a dozen people. That's not bad. How many of you can solve Rubik's Cubes in under 2 minutes? Oh, cool. Okay, about half of those. So I just described the difference between complication and complexity. Complication means I can leave these Rubik's Cubes right here. If no one touched them and they stayed there, and I could come back a week later, they're going to look exactly like that. They didn't change. Time did not have any difference over these things. But if we're talking about speed cubing, guess what? It's all about complexity. It's about muscle memory. I couldn't tell you how I did that. If I tried to explain how I did that move, I would have to slow down. I would have to go, wait a minute, do I turn left or, I don't remember. Here, let me do it fast again. So that's muscle memory. And muscle memory is something extremely familiar to musicians. When they're practicing together as a band, they're building that muscle memory. So that's what we want. We want to build muscle memory between us. But when we're in an incident, we can't depend on the things that we're training for. We can't think, oh, how did I train for this? We really have to kind of think about the incident. So there's some questions that you can help yourselves when you're conducting incidents that will guide you through the things that humans use to communicate with each other. Number one, what are your roles? Where in that response trio do I belong? If you don't have confusion over roles, then you're lowering your cost of coordination. Now, it depends. Of course, it's going to depend on how big your organization is. Like I said, sometimes that response trio might only be one person, or it might only be 3 people. But sometimes it's 3,000 people, and then it's a lot more important to understand who's doing what. And who's doing what where? Do we have some common place to do it? If we're continually switching our focus between, oh, there was a Slack channel there, they're in a Zoom meeting over here, oh, actually, there's 4 different people, 5? Wow, there's 5 different Slack channels that this incident is being discussed in. And all those Slack channels have threads. So a piece of advice, if you do handle your incidents in something like Slack, a chat program, try to get things together. Try to make that communication common. Oops. What routines can we handle? What can we do? Now, this is something that we've practiced. We already know. But when we get into an incident, maybe we don't know this. Maybe we're having to improvise. There's routines. Sorry about that. Do we know how to find expertise? Who has it? Where is it? What is it? Now, that's really difficult to do under production pressure. Now, if it's not a very, very high severity incident, then maybe you have some time to go and find the right people. But if you know ahead of time where to look in a general sense, maybe you have on-call services and pager duty, and you can actually page that service. That will help you. And we're going to talk about some exercises later that help. How are we perceiving this production pressure? Everyone, just like everyone has a different mental model, Everyone has a different perspective of the incident. Everyone also has a different perception of the problem. Some people will think it's extremely important. This gets us close to, the priority versus severity discussion. But some people don't think it's that bad. The customer might think it's really bad. The customer may be experiencing some kind of gray failure that we can't see on the back end. Something's wrong for the customer, but we can't tell what it is. So what does the production pressure feel like? Is anyone tired? Is anyone fatigued? Who hasn't eaten? What are competing priorities? I was in an incident that I actually was able to do a Howie analysis on because it was so interesting. I got called at the beginning of the company all hands. It's a really, come up and ask me about that incident. It's a really good one. But there may be other competing priorities, besides meetings and stuff like that. Feature work, that's a competing priority. And what time of day is it? Are people getting called in the middle of the night? Are you a distributed team where you have workers in Europe or Asia? Are you thinking about the fact that maybe they have to be on a different schedule, or they're being called? It's the middle of the day for you. What time is it for them? So supporting humans. As we're asking these questions, asking and conversing is very important, but listening is very important. If you think about how much you were listening while we were singing, it's a very integrated part of how we operate as humans together. And when I say listening, I don't mean you have to be hearing able to listen. Pauline talks about listening as something that moves beyond hearing. I love this one quote from Pauline, and I think it's actually one of her pieces, and it's something like, "Listen to the world with your feet." Update. Give new joins a status. Check in often. Now, sometimes when people come in and people are really busy, you can go through a backlog or something like that. But sometimes these Slack channels are really, really busy, and that's really, really hard to do. So this is actually a piece of joint activity. This is a piece of building common ground. When new people come into a joint activity, or when people are exiting the joint activity, you need to update everybody that this is happening, because we're all in this together. We need that common ground. Guide. Suggest alternatives. Guide younger or less experienced people through their decisions. How do you monitor this stuff? How do you know? Well, look, if there's 4 or 5 Slack channels being opened, that's one good hint that there's some kind of bifurcation of knowledge happening. Get people, excuse me, if these things happen, get people into a meeting. Say, okay, we're going to put all of our work down. I understand the incident's still happening, but we're having a coordination surprise right now, and we need to resync. So everyone, put your pencils down, get into this thread, or get on the Zoom, and we're gonna figure out how we can recalibrate. I mentioned, where do we find expertise? A good way to do this is to create some kind of matrix so that it's easy for the responders to see, oh, this thing in the UI is broken, that matches this service right here, I know it belongs to this team. And I can pull that team in a lot quicker this way. One of the things that I love to do is to put RSS feeds in a dedicated channel that are like status page updates. I'm dealing with a problem in my current job where one person is the one person that everyone goes to check status page because he signed up for updates into his email. Well, that's a single point of failure. Include diverse perspectives. Informed decisions are better than rapid ones, I promise you. I know you want to get the incident mitigated, but get perspectives about everything. Remember, there are all different kinds of them, and include them. Temple Grandin likes to say, the world needs all kinds of minds, and I really believe that. Tunnel vision is an interesting thing when we're doing joint activities. And guess what? You don't know that it's happening. Now, we all see that you're in tunnel vision, but you do not. That's the definition of tunnel vision. You need us to help you break out of tunnel vision. And vice versa. I would want you to help me break out of tunnel vision. That's what reciprocity is helping others and knowing that they will give that help back to you. How do you break that? Start asking questions. That's one of the biggest things you can do in incidents. If things start to feel like they're getting slow and bogged down, talk. Communicate. Be a human. Anyone familiar with the term rubber duck? Okay, a few. So the term rubber duck doesn't really actually literally mean a rubber duck. What it means is that I've got some kind of toy or something on my desk, and I have a problem. I'm going to sit the toy on my desk, and I'm going to sit there and talk to it. I'm going to say, I haven't been able to figure out this replication problem. It's just really nuts. And the toy isn't going to talk back to me. That's the point. I'm kind of soliloquying to the toy, knowing that it's not going to talk back to me, because I'm just kind of working through my thoughts. Be a rubber duck for people in Slack. If they look like they're having a problem with a decision or something, get them to start talking. Get them to work through their ideas. Get them to work through their thoughts. And you can prepare for all of this with collaborative training. This is my favorite thing. At my last role, we used the practice of practice to help us every week. What you're looking at here is something I call the wheel of expertise. I'll describe it in a couple slides. So we called this session Practice of Practice Gamelan. A gamelan is an Indonesian percussion orchestra. The interesting thing about the gamelan is not so much the instruments or the way that it sounds, but that the gamelan gets together iteratively. They start with a song. They'll write a theme. Jazz is a little bit similar in that, you have a jazz head. And then you take that song or you take that jazz head and you learn it. And so we're in the gamelan, we all learn the song together, and then we come to our next gamelan rehearsal. We don't pick a new song. We choose the song that we learned in the last rehearsal, and then we improvise to make it different. And we push it forward. And then the next gamelan, we do the same thing until we keep going. And then when we get to the performance, the piece is magically finished. But guess what? When we're in the performance, the piece gets developed again. It's an awesome kind of iterative process. And that's what we're looking for when we're looking for building reciprocity and working together as teams. All these things start to happen. We share our workflows. One of the most interesting thing that I found when we did this weekly session is that it gave us a chance. I didn't expect this. It gave us a chance to practice remote collaboration. How many times, show of hands, how many times have you gotten into a Zoom call and something doesn't work and no one knows how to do it? How do I get to the whiteboard? Wait, how do I put my hand up? How do I do this? I mean, in the middle of the call, though. And it's like, well, then we have to stop the meeting for like 5 minutes, we have to do something. Why? Okay, what were we talking about? It gets in the way. One of the things that we did in this session is we actually stopped. We're like, wait a minute, we're talking about an incident or something. I want to share my screen, but I want to do that thing with it where I've got 2 different screen sharing. Does anyone know how to do that? We take the time to go through that and learn how to do it together. That's the whole point. So it's iterative. Like I was describing with the gamelan, we keep doing it over and over and over again. So one of the things that is the most important about this session, so we're building reciprocity in this session. This is where we're learning how to improvise. And in order to learn how to improvise, we have to do real things. We can't do tabletop exercises. Improvisation doesn't happen unless it happens. So we try to do things that eke out, that need to improvise. And one of the things that we did is the first thing listed there, the wheel of expertise. Now, what we would do with the wheel is you can kind of see it in the background there. It has a lot of different words on it, you know, email, SLO, login, runbook, tag. Some of those are more general terms. Some of them were very specific to the services that we ran. So we would spin the wheel and we would go around the room, give everyone a chance to do it. That's very important, round robin style. We would spin the wheel of expertise. It would land on a thing. And then whoever is spinning the wheel, I obviously spun it, but whoever was virtually spinning the wheel would then have to show their knowledge of that thing. Now, it wasn't just like, tell us about what you know about this thing, show us what you know about the thing. Show us the process. If you didn't know, if you recalled during an incident and it was for this service, what would you do? How would you know about the service? So all different kinds of things would happen. People who didn't know services would be completely lost. And that happened a lot because the session was open to multiple disciplines. We would have technical writers in there. Marketing came all the time. Sales came in there. It was a diverse group. So a lot of those people didn't understand some of these words, but they would land on the word and they would go, I don't really know. Well, so we would help them. Well, try go searching in the wiki. Share your screen and show us how you would search for this in the wiki. Or share your screen and show us how you would look for this in GitHub or something like that. Well, then an expert would get on for something, you know, like email. Actually, it was this really great one where it was a storage service and an expert landed on the storage service and was able to tell us all these different kinds of things about the storage service. All the way down to the code, how it worked. A lot of us didn't know how this function worked in the product. 2 weeks later, there was an incident with that thing. And 100%, it saved us time. The responders told me, oh my God, I can't believe that we did a deep dive on this very system 2 weeks before it went down. So we get to introspect our work without production pressure in this session. We get to look at the things that we attend to in the incident in a much deeper way. We can ask questions about those things. We can do some knowledge elicitation. Wheel of expertise is one great way to do that. We grow closer as humans, and one of the most awesome comments I ever got from anyone about this session was from someone from marketing. And they said, I have never been able to get so much empathy for engineers in any other way than I did in this session. It's a perfect way to spread empathy between different divisions in your organization. And guess what? That's SRE. That's what SRE does. We're all over the place. I'd like to leave us with a quote by Dr. Richard Cook. This is from How Complex Systems Fail, and I just couldn't say it any other way. Human practitioners are the adaptable element of complex systems. Thank you.